Welcome back. You're listening to Real Talk with Brian and Dan on 1150 KKNW.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Dan. Our first guest today is Catherine Owens, author of Be Your Own Hero, Senior Living Decisions Simplified. Catherine is a nationally recognized industry expert and has worked in a variety of roles in senior living, including leadership, staff training, sales and marketing, and corporate development. Along with her book, Catherine has been published and featured in national industry journals, is a regular guest on national and local radio shows, and speaks to audiences about understanding and navigating senior living decisions. Her extensive knowledge and in-depth experience of providing for seniors' needs has created successful outcomes for seniors and their families, helping them make choices that encapsulate the hopes and dreams aimed at living fully, rather than just making a change in location. As an author, Catherine has received local and national awards for her book, Be Your Own Hero, Senior Living Decisions Simplified, a book she wrote with the hope of addressing the misconceptions surrounding senior living and to create a movement of knowledgeable and independent seniors who research their options early. Catherine is a 2017 recipient of the Tribute to Women in Industry, or TWIN Award, which honors women who have excelled in their field and made significant contributions to the industries. We are looking forward to talking to you. And so you're here. Catherine, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you both for having me here today.
So, Catherine, as you look at, before we get into the whole senior living, we like to get to know you. So tell me a bit about your hobbies and interests when you're not helping change how seniors think about senior living.
Absolutely. Well, I am learning to golf, or as I would say, learning patience. But love golfing and spending time with my grandson. He kind of put a halt on all of my hobbies because now I just want to hang out with him.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I'd like to ask each guest to share with us a fond memory of the home you grew up in.
So although I don't live here locally now, I did grow up in the Puget Sound area. And I think one of the things I loved about my home growing up is I had 8 siblings.
Wow.
Or have 8 siblings. And it was always just a lot of energy. And we were one of those homes that everybody felt like it was home. So we always had friends that were hanging out, calling my parents mom and dad. It was just a very open and welcoming environment.
Where was this?
I actually grew up in Renton.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah. Fantastic.
Cool.
So what is, getting into the senior living topic, what's the number one misconception?
Dan, I would say the number one misconception is people think as we age that in order to maintain independence, we need to stay in our home. And really the reality is if you're in the right environment that really supports your needs, you're going to age successfully a lot better. Studies show that 70% of how we age is determined on the choices that we make. So making a choice to be in an environment that really supports your current needs really does allow people to maintain their independence a lot longer.
So what's the most common approach to senior living?
To not approach senior living.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
It's one of those topics that people don't want to talk about, that we avoid discussing. You know, we plan for retirement and we think about travel and time with our grandkids and all of these things, but we don't plan for what would we need if things were to change and we had needs. And so really the whole reason I wrote my book was to get people to be proactive and at least start having discussions whether or not they ever need services, because typically I see people that are making reactionary decisions. There's been an event, there's been a fall, there's been a diagnosis.
Well, I would say that most of the time people keep their heads in the sand, right? They're not really thinking.
Absolutely.
So what do people need to do to keep in mind when they start to kind of have that conversation about where or why we should choose a specific community?
You know, I would just start by having a conversation with the family. I tell people to have plan A in a perfect scenario. What does that look like if you guys should need to make a move to a senior living community, can no longer maintain your home? But then have plan B, so if something does happen, you kind of have a backup plan. I think life often happens in plan B, and because people wait till there's an emergency. So start having dialogue with the family. Let your kids know what's important to you. Together as a couple, maybe talk about what's important to you should you need to make this type of decision. And start researching options. Senior living really is an industry where you get what you pay for. And no community is apples to apples. We all provide similar things, but how we provide it, the quality, the flexibility, the amount, is really what gives people their day-to-day satisfaction.
What are things that people aren't prepared for when looking into senior living?
I think people just really aren't prepared for how overwhelming it can be, not understanding what differentiates a community, what's involved, the cost, the emotions that it evokes when people start having these discussions, whether it's the supporting family members or the seniors themselves. It really is an emotional decision process. And so allowing yourself really that opportunity to start having discussions and seeing how you feel about different things when it comes to making these types of decisions.
So I think about, as folks begin their estate planning, in fact, we're all mortal. Everybody, it all ends the same way according to everybody, right? So as I consider my kids, my kids are college age, right? So it's really not on my purview, right? Is there a specific time that it's just a good time to talk about it, or how do you breach it? I mean, to me, I feel like the earlier you have the conversation, the better, right? So when I go in to have my will, I'm kind of like already in mind, if I have A, B, and C, then I'd like to go to this place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like even though I'm young, I would love to just, I told you before when we were in the green room, is like, no, what I'd really like to do is just put me on a plane down in the Caribbean or cruise, a never-ending cruise,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the things, even just kind of, I hear adult children say all the time when they start helping their parents is, I really need to start planning things like long-term care insurance. The reality is 3 out of 4 of us are going to need some level of support. And your kids taking care of you is not a good backup plan.
Right.
I mean, they have the things that they're managing their lives. And I always call it kind of the sandwich generation with adult kids. They're trying to take care of parents, and they're also trying to take care of their kids and their own lives. So start having those conversations early, realizing that the industry is changing, options are changing. So keep checking in and seeing how things are changing. But sometimes if you don't know what you even want or what's important to you in a community, in a home, in that phase in your life, you just don't know where to start.
Can you give us a story of when it worked really well for people planning this? Or is it always, because we hear a lot of discussion about it. It's like, man, can't get mom to decide to do it. Can't get dad to decide to do it.
Absolutely.
Can you give me some success stories? How has it worked really smoothly?
Well, it doesn't always work really smoothly, but as far as success stories, we as a society are taught to age in place. And so we dig into our homes and we're thinking that, or we have to move to a community where we can just placehold because they have everything we may need down the road. Taking the approach of putting in place what you need to age well, again, keeping in mind that 70% of how we age is by the choices we make. So what the success I've seen is people, they say, when do I need to make a move? It's always before you need to make a move. But people that get those that environment in place where they're staying socially engaged, where they're having a reason to get dressed every day, they're moving. A lot of people think being in our home is independent, but they're sitting all day long. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So cognitively, mobility-wise. And so the success is really when I see people make that decision early before they need to, they actually maintain all of that independence that they're so afraid of losing.
So why did you write your book, Be Your Own Hero, Senior Living Decisions Simplified?
Well, what I realized, as we talked about earlier, it's a topic people don't want to talk about. They put their head in the sand and they wait until they are forced to talk about it. And they don't know where to look, what questions they should be asking, or even just what to expect as they're going through the process. So I really wanted to get people to start being proactive, have conversations, understand the services available before or whether or not they ever need those services.
So you work at Revel for the I keep saying it, Revel Communities.
Revel Communities, yes.
Let's talk about those, because I had a tour of one about 3 weeks ago here in Issaquah, brand new one, just off I-90 in Issaquah, and it's a little bit of a different setup than your just senior living or assisted housing. Let's go into that for a little bit.
Absolutely, Dan. And so again, that's why it's important to look at different communities, because we're all different. The thing I love about Revel Communities is, again, the number one fear people have is losing that independence. So they provide the support of having like meals and housekeeping and social and peer-to-peer opportunities, but they do it in a way that allows people to have as much independence of choice as possible. So people use those amenities when and how they want. And you were joking about being put on a cruise ship out to sea. I have a lot of people say it actually feels like you're on a cruise in port. But there's so many more opportunities. I see people's worlds open up. If they're no longer driving and they're in their house and they're dependent on their kids coming and taking them places and doing things, they have everything right outside their door. They've got fitness center, movie theater, multiple dining options. So there's opportunities to engage and be amongst peers and to continue to learn and grow. Again, it's about learning. It's about growing. It's about living. People will say, Mom's managing. Life isn't meant to be managed. It's
right,
meant to be lived. And so Revel takes the approach of how can we help people continue living with sense of purpose, growing, having opportunities to share who they are, what their talents are, but be safe and continue to age well.
And
So-
as I understand it, I'm sorry, Brian.
Good.
As I understand it, you guys have other communities all around the United States, right?
We do. We're primarily on the West Coast, but
Okay.
we are growing. So the thing that's really neat, you talk about the cruise ship.
Yeah.
We actually have a great travel program that a lot of our residents use where they can go spend a week free in any of our communities up to 4 times a year. So
There you go.
they have kids in other states, they have friends in other states, they want to snowbird, just different things. So again, what's important to you? How can we help you live your best life?
So you use the word independence, but how do you see control, the desire for control of their own lives playing into this? What's your experience?
Absolutely. Great question, because one of those fears people have is losing independence and control of their decisions. And I tell people to shift their thought process and take control and make those decisions when they can independently do so. And sometimes when people say, I'm afraid of losing my independence, they're afraid of losing their identity. They don't want to be seen as someone's job or just another resident. But I always say I'm a senior living expert, but maybe Joe, who I'm working with, he's an expert on Joe and what's
Right.
important to Joe. And so really a good community is going to be taking the time to find out what's important to Joe and how can we give Joe the best quality of life possible.
Oh, that's great. So you have an upcoming speaking engagement.
Absolutely.
That's coming up on February 20th.
Yes, at Revel Issaquah, and I will be doing a presentation that discusses all of these misconceptions and social stigmas that are in my book, the best way to make decision processes, how to maintain your independence. And that's at 2 o'clock at Revel Issaquah on the 20th, and I will be doing a book signing and giving out free copies of my book.
Awesome. And do people need to RSVP for that, or?
They don't, but it would be preferred, and a number that people can call is 425-295-7693, or they can go to our website, revelissaquah.com.
Okay.
That's great.
Awesome. Well, Catherine, thank you for coming on the show today. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun kind of being in my hometown.
Nice.
Nice.
Welcome back. All right. After the break, we are welcoming Mary Gleason of marygleason.life, who will be talking to us about intuition coaching and how it can help you make better decisions at work and in life. Come on back after the break for more Real Talk.